Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I was just saying that NAU was kind of a springboard for some of the bands that became popular later, you know, like Billy Joel and everybody. So I'm trying to think of the concerts that I saw when I was in high school. I think my first concert was Loggins and Messina.
Okay.
And
Kenny Loggins?
Kenny Loggins and Jim Messina.
Okay.
Of course, they were a duo for a while, and Kenny Loggins had a solo career.
Okay.
And then I saw Seals and Croft. Seals and Croft, you ever heard of them?
I don't know. What about them?
And then the Beach Boys, they were big when my sisters were, you know, like in the 60s. But they had a resurgence in like 10 years later in the 70s. And I went to see them in concert with my friends.
Those all the original members still?
Probably not. I mean, I probably like 4 out of 5, right? Because I don't think Brian was touring at that
I
time.
forget the history behind Brian had a mental breakdown.
Yeah, I don't think Brian was there, but his brothers and his cousin and Al Jardine, and they had somebody else fill in his place. So I saw them. Those are the main ones I saw.
What venue was that?
That was at, oh God, I just saw it on the TV. It was Tempe Diablo Stadium.
Okay.
And when I saw Seals and Crofts, that was at Big Surf.
Oh, wow. You used to do shows there then. So it was still
Yes,
a water
they did.
park.
It was.
Park by day, concerts at night.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
more money for the owners, I guess.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah. And I'm trying to remember when I saw Loggins and Messina, that might have been at the same place I saw the Beach Boys, I forget. And I also I used to go to a lot of bars in Tempe when I was in college, because my friend Barbara Mason, she went to NAU for like a year and she didn't like it. So she transferred to ASU.
Huh.
So I would come home about once a month, and I'd be home in the summers. So there were a lot of bars in Tempe that I knew. There was.
Now, you never had your own car in college, or did you?
I got one my senior year.
Okay, so how did you get home?
I usually got rides.
Just catch a ride with someone?
Yeah, I usually had friends. There was always somebody going there. And a lot of times, I don't know if they did this when you're, people would put up like a little sign in the mail room that you could tear off, you know, going to Phoenix, if you want to ride, call my phone, and then you know,
Help pay for gas.
Help pay for gas.
It's a win-win, yeah.
Yes, but I almost always went with a friend. So I'd come home about once a month, and my friends and I would go to the Tempe bars. So there was a place called Sun Devil Lounge that was really big. There was another place called Dooley's that was really big.
Where were these, roughly?
Most of them were on Apache.
Okay.
And I think I Googled one of them recently, and they're all gone, they're all torn down.
Changed over, yeah.
Yeah, but, what was the other? Oh, Minder Binders was another one. I think that might still be around.
That's that giant red barn thing. Was that over on like McClintock?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to go there, and there was another place
It
called,
might have reopened or something. I feel like I might have gone
Yeah.
to Warren at one point
Yeah, you
in the
might
last few
have.
years.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's another place called Blue Goat Pub that was kind of more country. I forget what, wasn't too far from Minder Binders. So, yeah. And then there were a couple of Phoenix bars. There was, there was a place on Grand Avenue that had, like, upstairs was disco and downstairs was country. And I remember when I first started going, I did the disco, and then years later I started going to the country.
Sure, as your taste evolved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of the name of that place. It's been around, it was around for years. I think Waylon Jennings played there, and I mean they always had live country band. Nobody famous when I
Now,
was.
disco at the time, that was like a new thing, so like it was
Yeah.
fun, it was like a dancey beat was the whole idea, right?
Yes, yeah. So Earth, Wind and Fire was big with disco, and Casey and the Sunshine Band, and another thing that was big when I was in college was the movie Saturday Night Fever. The soundtrack for that with the Bee Gees, that was really big at the discos, so I used to listen to a lot of that. I didn't have that album, but almost all my friends did, so you could always hear it going. Another person who was sort of emerging at that time was Bruce Springsteen. He was big at NAU. I actually bought his album Born to Run, and I think I told the story. There was a girl across the hall from me who was from New Jersey, and she loved Bruce Springsteen. She had that album. She played that song over and over and over all the time. And it got to the point where I couldn't stand that song for like 20 years. Now I can hear it, but for a while I'm like, oh, please.
Yeah, once or twice is fine, but like 100 or 200 times
like,
gets old.
And she'd have to probably physically go over to the because it was on a turntable. She had to physically go and, remove the needle.
Wow. Some people are just so obsessed with
She
whatever.
was really, because, he's from New Jersey.
He's a New Jersey guy, that's the whole thing.
That was her thing, yeah.
Wow.
So
Before she ruined it, it was a good album.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I liked a group called the Moody Blues.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Jenny was really into them, so I listened to some of her albums and I got a lot of their albums.
Mm-hmm.
And my first album was called Nilsson Schmilsson,
Oh,
Harry Nilsson.
yeah.
I liked that album a lot.
It's a classic. Duncan likes that one.
Yeah, it was a good album.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked Carly Simon.
Okay.
My album was called No Secrets. That was one of her big ones.
Hmm.
They had You're So Vain, and that was probably the most famous one.
Mm-hmm.
Carole King was really big when I was like 8th grade, freshman year in high school. She had an album called Tapestry that a lot of my friends had. I should have gotten that album too because I liked all the songs. And she had You've Got a Friend and It's Too Late Baby. It was really a good album.
Oh, yeah. I had that one on the oldie station in Portland.
Yeah.
Too late, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was really good. So that was that. I could go on about music, but let's see, you were wanting to know about like when I graduated and that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I graduated, when I first started college, my major, I was undeclared. I kind of was thinking of being a teacher or maybe possibly considering law school.
Really?
But I was lazy.
So that's where I get it.
Again, I was a lot of myself in my children. Not that you're all lazy.
Yeah, yeah.
I could see those tendencies.
There's that influence there.
Yeah. So I decided, and my dad always said, you should go into computers, that's the wave of the future, which was right.
Yeah,
So
you
I
were saying
thought,
that back in the 70s.
yeah. And so I thought, well, so I decided to major in business, and I always liked writing and journalism ideas, so I thought, let me just take a journalism class for fun as an elective. And I found that I liked that better than my business classes, but I had taken like a full semester of business classes, so I had almost enough for like halfway to having a minor in business. So I thought, well, let me just flip it. So I decided to major in journalism and minor in business. So I met my friends Dawn and Alan through my business classes. I joined a business fraternity and they joined it at the same time as me.
What was it called?
It was called Delta Sigma Pi. And it used to be all male, but then there was some title, something or other came along and they had to let women in. And that was kind of weird because there were a lot of guys in there that didn't like having women in.
Just because the rules changed doesn't mean attitudes have changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they, so our pledge class was co-ed, and might have been one before us, but the pledge class after that, they blackballed all the women that applied. It was an all-male class, so they were kind of under fire for that. And then they eased up on it, but they were almost like redneck guys, they were just like, women.
Attitudes take time to change.
Yeah.
It takes many years, generations sometimes for it to fully, get those bad ideas out of people's systems.
Yeah. So that's how I got to be friends with them, and they were really nice. And
Is that how they met, or had they met?
no, they were high school sweethearts.
Okay.
They went to school in Burbank, beautiful downtown Burbank, and they started dating when they were 15.
Oh wow, they're still together to this day?
Yeah, they got married in 1980.
Wow.
So what was that,
42 years?
Yeah, they were married 42 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I did an internship one summer at the city of Phoenix. It was unpaid. That was the Parks, Recreation, and Library Department in the Public Information Office. So I would write public service announcements and little articles, and it was a neat experience because I got to see, you know, how public relations worked, and we'd send out these like press kits and things, and
How'd you get that internship lined up? Or?
my counselor told me about it.
No.
And so I did an interview with the head of the department, and he said, you can do it. So I didn't hear you, he hired me. So I did that for the summer, and it was a nice experience. But I was still, I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. I had a lot of insecurity, and every once in a while they'd have a, you know, company that would come, like Mountain Bell, which was the phone company that is going to be interviewing, and you know, you should sign up. And I was always too scared, and I didn't take advantage of it. And there was one time I actually was going to do an interview. I got up the courage, but then I got this really bad case of the flu. I had like a real high fever. I was throwing up, and I ended up missing it. Yeah. And so again, it was just more just my insecurity that I thought, well, I'll just wait till I graduate and then I'll get a job, you know, when I move home. So I tried to do that, and it didn't go very well because it was kind of a recessionary time, and
was it the Carter years or the stagflation stuff going on?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I felt like a failure because a lot of my friends in business, they were going on all these interviews and they were all getting jobs, and I hadn't gotten one yet. And so I went to an employment agency, and you know, pretty much all I could get at the time was secretarial jobs. So I got a job. Actually, I got a full-time job working for a CPA firm. It was lousy pay. It was over by Christown. It was off of 19th Avenue and Bethany, in that vicinity. It was behind a bowling alley. And these two brothers, Olson and Olson PC was the name of their company. So I did that for like 8 or 10 months, and it was just not a good, it was a dead-end job. Yeah. But one good thing about it was it taught me how to put a tax return together. I really, so at the end I found like, okay, you do it alphabetically, you do it in number order, like this is the way you do it. So, so I picked up that. And in fact, I just did that recently when we filed our taxes. So anyway, so I left there, and then I decided, well, it was hard for me to go on interviews because I had this full-time job, and you know, only had a half hour for lunch. So that's why I thought, well, let me start doing temp work. So I got a temp job where my hours were like noon to 9 p.m. And it was data entry, and it was at Revlon. They used to have a factory like Baseline or Buckeye, like 43rd Avenue. It was way southwest of the valley.
What did data entry look like in those days?
I'm trying to remember. We were in this factory, and then we'd have to enter in like merchandise codes and stuff like that. It was real easy.
Was it electronic or typewriter? Or?
It was a computer.
Okay.
And I remember they had these like robos, they called them, these like robotic arms that would pick things off the shelves and put them on these pallets for, you know, being sent to different places. And I don't know, it was kind of an eye-opener for me working there, just the few little bit that I was there. It wasn't very long, like maybe 3 months. Because then you started to see people that, I was so immature, I didn't realize the value of an education yet. That was late for me. And I saw people there that, they worked in the factory, and that's, you know, this one girl, she said she got the job because she wanted to buy a boombox or something. And that was the only reason she got the job, was so she could get a boombox. And then these other people would talk about their parties, and you know, it just seemed like they weren't going anywhere.
They didn't have a lot of like long-term vision. It was all just very short-term thinking.
And they were talking about the next great party and this, and I just thought something kind of clicked in with me that, you know, I thought, I don't want to just be like that. You know, I actually do want more to life, and I'm going to do something with my life rather than this. So I'm going to leave here, and they'll still be here, but I feel like I understand now. I've got a college degree and I want to use it. Yeah. So they called me one day, the temp agency, and they said, we have a temp job that's available at Motorola. And they said, but it could become permanent, and it could be a foot in the door for you, because they knew I was looking for something, you know, where I could use my degree. So they said, you know, it's called a senior clerk position. It was for some gal that had gone on maternity leave, but they didn't think she was coming back. So I took that job, and I was a temp. They called me a black badger, because the regular employees had like a blue and white badge, and the temp employees had a black and white badge. So I was a black badger, and my boss was Ron Bishop.
Okay, yeah.
So that was my foot in the door, and he was a really good boss, and he knew the same things, like, oh, you got a college degree, you should get a better job. So he had contacts, and he would put me in touch with people, and eventually I got the job with the Roadrunner, the company newspaper. So it took me, I don't know, maybe about a year, but I got some good experience, working at Motorola and the culture and all that stuff. And the pay was actually really good. And he was really good about hiring me, even though I was not using my degree. He started me at a higher wage, and I was making more than some of my friends. So I felt pretty good about that, because I was used to making the least. So that was nice. So I got the job with them, and then I started working for the company newspaper, and then eventually I got another job that was a promotion, working in Mesa, and then went back to working for the Roadrunner and expanded my role, and I had a pretty decent job when I left. So that was that. And then when I lived at home for about a year
with
my parents.
Yeah.
And I was saving up my money, and when I got the job at Motorola, I decided that I was ready to move out on my own. So I found an apartment. It was at 48th Street in Thomas, and it was a one-bedroom. Actually, I moved into a studio at first, and I lived in this studio for like a weekend, and I felt like the walls were closing in on me, because it was like just one room, and I felt really, it just didn't feel right. So the following Monday, I went to the office, do you have any one bedrooms I could transfer into? Like, yeah, we do. So I moved like across the way to this one bedroom, and I lived there for like 2 years, 2 or 3 years, something like that. So it was real close to work. I could actually walk to work occasionally. I did that, and it was nice. And then after about 2 years, it was not like the fanciest place, but it was functional, and I was kind of looking to get something a little bit nicer. So I was thinking about maybe getting a roommate, and around that time, Maureen was kind of thinking along the same lines. So we decided to look for a place together. So Maureen and I got we found this condo. It was a 2-bedroom condo, and it was a 2-story. And it was real cute, and that was on a street called Monte Rosa. It was like 36th Street in Indian School. It was kind of the Arcadia area. And she was working as a school teacher, and she worked kind of near the airport, so it was a pretty good location for her, and it was still a good location for me too. So we did that, and so while I was there.
What year would this be? Early 80s?
Yeah, this is in the early. I graduated in 79. I think I moved out in 81. I think I started working at Motorola in 81.
Okay.
And then Dad moved out in 83. So Maureen and I were living together, and my sister Kathy belonged to this Catholic singles group called the Catholic Alumni Club. And she was real involved with it. They had a lot of different activities. The rules were you had to be a practicing Catholic, a college graduate, or have some type of professional designation like an RN.
Can't be a dud.
Yeah, and free to marry in the Catholic Church. So she was, and if you didn't meet all the requirements, you could be like an associate member. You could still go to some of the activity. I don't know what that meant, but anyway, so she encouraged me to join. And
Kathy wanted you to go.
She's like, oh, you should join. You know, there's a lot of people your age and stuff. So, so I did. I joined, and I met some nice people and all that. And then one time she told me that she said, well, you know what? There's this guy that just joined the Catholic Alumni Club, and Kathy was the president of bowling, because would have parties at people's houses. They would have like a meetup, you know, we're gonna all meet at this restaurant, go out to dinner, and then we're gonna go to this movie. They had a bowling league, they had volleyball, they would, you know, go tubing down the Salt River and that kind of stuff. So she said, oh, there's this guy that just joined, and he is from Chicago, and he's your age, and he's got a really good sense of humor, and I think he'd be perfect for you. and his name is John Schultz.
Ooh.
And I said, oh, really? She's like, yeah. So I'm like, okay. So I kind of, took that in the back of my head. So I would go to various things. And one night I went to this house party, they called it. And Kathy wasn't there, but there was a guy standing in the kitchen. And there was like a group of people standing around, they were talking. And this guy was cracking jokes and really funny. And he had a Chicago accent.
Oh, still had the accent.
So I'm like, I bet that's him.
That's the legendary John Schultz.
The legendary John Schultz. So I went up to him when there was like a lull, and I said, "Is your name John Schultz?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "I've heard about you." And he said, "Anything good?" Like,
Quick wit.
Yeah. So I said, "Oh, my sister, knows you." And he's like, "Oh, who's your sister?" I said, "Kathy Foley." He's like, "Oh, really? That's your sister?" Because he didn't think we looked anything alike.
Yeah.
So that's how we met. And then we didn't date at first or anything. I would just see him at various activities.
Mhm.
And
Did he hit it off with other gals at the time? Or?
apparently, yes. There was a girl that was in the club. Her name was Nayla Myers. She was a real nice girl. He met her for drinks once, I guess. And there was another girl in the club. Her name was Lori something. She had a crush on him. And I know I don't think he had any interest in her. So I know about those two. And so we used to go to a lot of the same activities, like, oh, we're gonna meet up at the park and blah, blah, blah. Well, I was having car trouble. And there was one event that was planned and I was gonna go to it, but I couldn't because my car crapped out and was in the shop. So they have like a phone list for the whole membership. So he called me up and he's like, "You weren't at the whatever it was." "Oh, I thought you'd be there." And I'm like, "No, I had car trouble." And so I guess that's kind of what spurred him into asking me out on a date. And so he's like, "Oh, well, are you free next weekend?" So
it was just a one-on-one thing then.
yeah, so then he asked me to go on a date. And then that's how we started dating.
Yeah. Do you remember the first one?
We went to the Scottsdale Center for the Arts used to have this summer cinema series where they'd have like old classic movies and like they'd have Alfred Hitchcock movies, and I'm pretty sure we went to see the movie Sabrina, which was an Audrey Hepburn movie, and Roman Holiday. I think we saw two Audrey Hepburn movies. And then afterwards, so we went there for that, and then afterwards we went dancing at the Hilton. I don't know if it's still the Hilton. It was at Lincoln Drive and Scottsdale Road. It was a resort, but they had a bar and a lounge and a restaurant, and they had live music there. So we went dancing afterwards. So I think that was our first date.
So Dad, just go dancing.
Yeah, he is a good dancer.
Really?
He doesn't like it, but he, when you're trying to land a lady,
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yes.
Wow.
Because after we got married, he didn't like to go dancing.
Yeah.
But he's good. Well, we took dance lessons a couple of times, and he's always good. He's got a real good sense of rhythm, and so he just doesn't enjoy it very much.
Sure.
So yeah, that was that. Oh, another thing I was going to say that was really big to do when I lived in Phoenix, late high school and into college. I had a summer job at Greyhound. Because my dad worked at Armour Foods.
It was Armour/Greyhound.
Yeah, Greyhound Armour, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a part-time job in the summer, and then I started working there my senior years because I only had half days. And I worked in the afternoons at Greyhound. And the department I worked in, they had all kinds of kids that were high school and college age. And this one guy that worked there, he was real friendly and nice. He used to organize groups to go tubing down the Salt River. Mm-hmm. And that was a really big thing to do in the summertime, to go tubing.
It still is. I've never been, but I know a lot of people still do that.
We used to do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so much fun. We would, and it was different back then. It wasn't organized. You had to, make sure you had at least two cars, one parked at the bottom, one parked at the top.
Right.
You'd have to get an inner tube, and then you have to make sure everybody had an inner tube. Then you'd have to have an inner tube for the ice chest.
Right. That's important.
You had to really coordinate it. So we would do that all the time. It was so much fun. And then when I was in the Catholic Alumni Club, they would have tubing trips sometimes. And Dad and that was another thing before we started dating that I kind of was trying to let Dad know that I liked him. They had a tubing event coming up, and he didn't have a tube, he'd never been tubing. So I said, you know, we have some extra tubes at my parents' house, so if you would like to borrow a tube, you know, and I'm driving, you can ride along with me. So he came over to we met at my parents' house, and my dad looked at tubes and all that stuff, and we went tubing.
Is that the first time your dad saw John?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, he met both my parents, he thought they were really nice. Yeah, so, yeah, so it was a good time.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Do a little pause.
Sure.
Oh, good.